Well, hello once again, friends. It is time for another edition of Orange Weekly, presented by Kraus Health. My name is Brent Dax, Nate Mink, syracuse.com with us here as we're ready to talk all things Syracuse football with you. And just a reminder that the show does air live on YouTube, on our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page, and on our Syracuse Orange Football Facebook page. Thursdays, right around 1-ish or so, we appear on your screens via those channels. But if you do miss it live, it does archive on YouTube. We put it up on our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page. You can find a post for it on syracuse.com. Follow us at SYR Football on Twitter, one way or the other. You can't get away from us even if you tried. It'll be out there for you to view live or down the road at your convenience. Nate, great to have you back here on the program. And boy, busy little Thursday for us at syracuse.com. Hope you guys out there have had a chance to digest some of the stuff we put out today about Tommy DeVito, which we're about to discuss with Nate. Chris Carlson busy with fourth down decisions, special teams. I did a little piece on the 44 and just who makes that call. So, man, we're cranking it out, baby. We're ready to go.
I just want to set the record straight. The 2-week absence is not COVID related. All right. I was not subject to quarantine.
That's right.
I was not invited. I was not invited on the program.
Well, listen, Mike Curtis was killing it, man. We had to bring Curtis in to talk about some of the great stories that he was writing, not only on the football side, but on the basketball side as well. And hey, we're going to start getting into basketball on the show as we go here. Tomorrow is whatever they call it these days, Orange Madness, right? Or whatever the scrimmage is at the Dome. And ready or not, basketball is knocking on the door here. So we'll start certainly discussing that more. But Nate, football, of course, still at the forefront here, and we'll get into the Virginia Tech game and a couple other things coming up here. But you had the opportunity to essentially do an exit interview with Tommy DeVito, and there was a lot revealed in there. So I just kind of want to give you the floor here and tell us about your discussion with Tommy and some of your big takeaways from that piece.
Sure. I reached out to Tommy earlier this week. He agreed to talk, and we got into a lot just that unfolded behind the scenes over the last 4 or 5 years that Tommy was in the program. Certainly touched on the end, right, because it was the narrative and the tenor really shifted earlier this season when Dino decided to make the quarterback change to Garrett Schrader. And that, I think, really started in a lot of people's minds this unofficial countdown to Tommy's exit from the program. Dino said as much to Tommy, too, in one of their final meetings. He kind of knew that this day was going to come. He just did not know exactly when it was going to come. And I think, the timing of Tommy's departure, I think, really boils down to a chance to get the clock started on finding his next school. I think it was advantageous for him to start researching schools, setting up visits, trying to get on the calendar for some of these visits. Being able to watch a live practice in season, I think, is important to Tommy. I think being able to experience and perhaps make a visit to check out a campus's game day environment is important. It gets a feel for how coaches coach, how the players respond to coaching within certain programs. And I think, when you only got 1 year left, he only has 1 year left. So, the eligibility thing is what it is. But when you start to factor in, and starting to answer the question, where do I want to play next year? You only get one chance to really get this thing right with only 1 year left. And, perhaps waiting until December or after the season, might be a bridge too far for him to want to wait that long. But we covered a lot of ground. The documenting of the injury situation, particularly over the last 2 seasons, I thought was very insightful. I don't know, and Tommy had said as much. Not many people outside the program, outside some teammates, and certainly the coaching staff probably knew the extent to which he was physically injured, particularly in that 2019 season when he was on the field for much of that season, but clearly playing through a lot of pain. We find out now that he had fractured rib cartilage. He had to get a pain-killing injection an hour before every game that season just to be able to kind of numb the pain and be comfortable out there. He had layer upon layer upon layer of extra padding just to be able to get to Saturday. And then on top of that, late in the season, he throwing a torn labrum in his throwing shoulder on top of that. And then, before the final game of the season, the thing that does him in is he gets his foot stepped on in practice and has to wear a protective boot, and he's just not mobile. And I think if you actually remember that game in the Wake Forest capper, that Clayton Welsh played the majority of the game. Clayton actually had to come out of the game for a play. Tommy had to come in, and it was really little to no movement. It was like hand the ball off and get the heck off the field so you don't, mess up the foot further. And then obviously last season, 4 games in, he breaks the ankle, and that's a season ender. So, when you look at kind of the full body of work, he went through a lot. He went through a lot in just 18 games as a starting quarterback. And then obviously the decision to move to this run-based emphasis with Sean Tucker as the focal point of the offense was just a sudden, dramatic, season-defining heel turn for this program and for this offense. And, there's going to be casualties when coaches have to make decisions that they feel are in the best interest of the program and of the team. And, that's just kind of the breaks of the game. And I think, that's unfortunate how it ended for a guy that came in here with certainly high expectations internally and externally. But, you look up and down, I go back to his Elite 11 class for a lot of perspective with Tommy. And if you look up and down that roster sheet of quarterbacks,
big names.
Who's had a normal college experience? Who's had
a lot of them, right?
Yeah. Jake Fromm, maybe Jake Fromm at Georgia, but you look at like Dylan McCaffrey at Michigan, transfers. Hunter Johnson at Clemson, transfers. Miles Brennan at LSU, injured. Sean Clifford at Penn State, rough season last year, off to a nice start this year, injured with a rib injury, similar to Tommy. Even Tua. Tua wins a national championship his freshman year at Alabama. Had a pretty significant hip injury by the time his Alabama career ended too. So it's just the nature of the sport, the nature of position. Rarely ever are things as rosy as everyone envisions at the start of this thing. There has to be an expectation of a bumpy road. And, that was just the course that presented itself here for Tommy at Syracuse.
There's 2 things that stand out, not only about your article, but this whole situation. Number one, on a kind of a smaller note, if you will, when you were describing just what Tommy had to do to get on the field last year, it reminded me of that scene from A Christmas Story when the mom is dressing up Randy to go out into the winter, and he falls down. He can't put his arms down, right? Like I just imagine Tommy out there with just all these flak jackets and armor and everything just to play a football game. But the second thing is, Nate, kind of what you hit on there. I mean, the story here that has come to an end is incredible to think about because he was an Elite 11 guy. He was a 4-star quarterback. He was in that 6-hour window that you ideally want to recruit from, right? You go all over the place. You go where the talent is. But here's a kid from New Jersey that wants to come to Syracuse. And there was a point in time when Syracuse would just walk into New Jersey like it was the duty-free shop at the airport, and they'd come out with their arms full of players, right? And, of course, that kind of trailed off. DeVito represented a big comeback, not only in that state, but in this part of the country, that you could find an elite quarterback there. He checked every box, was the heir apparent to Eric Dungy. You go from one dynamic quarterback, and the hope was to another. And it just comes to this abrupt end, injuries leading up to it, the transfer portal in play, and it just shows you how college sports is changing here. And look, Dino certainly – you could tell was emotional at his press conference earlier this week about this coming to an end and what Tommy means to him. And, he said he'll do whatever it takes for him going forward. And he's always got a recommendation from him. But look, I don't want to speak for him. People should read the article. You could certainly tell that Tommy was frustrated in one way, in the sense of, hey, look, I made some suggestions, had some heart-to-heart discussions with Dino, even suggested players to come in and help out on the offensive line. And you could tell like he really tried to express his opinions and what he thought could turn Syracuse football around. And some of that happened and some of it didn't. But one way or the other, Nate, you can write the story with every box you got to check, and it could still come to an end where everybody kind of looks at it and will be thinking what could have been.
No doubt. I mean, I think that speaks to just, the unique relationship Dino and Tommy had. I mean, that was, let's face it, that was Tommy's guy. That was his handpicked quarterback run his offense back in 2017 after Dungy graduated. And there's an element of luck to this, right? Like, I mean, there are countless 5-star quarterbacks that don't pan out. You look at Syracuse's history, maybe the two most recent success stories, the three most recent success stories, I guess. Dungy, who was, a vastly under-recruited player out on the West Coast, who may have wound up at Wyoming if Josh Allen didn't wind up at Wyoming.
Right.
Wyoming made a poor choice there, I guess. Ryan Nassib was a 2-star recruit from outside Philadelphia. That's that geographic footprint that you want to make sure you comb over pretty thoroughly and make sure you don't miss anyone there. And then, McNabb was all the way out in Chicago, and not many schools were even going to give him a chance to play quarterback, and Syracuse gave him a chance to play quarterback. So, again, the breaks of the game, I think, a lot of people wanted this to end a certain way, and it's unfortunate it didn't. But I think, like, the respect, like, I don't think Tommy lost a lot of respect, especially amongst his guys that kind of went through, that proverbial fog of war with him. You look at, social media feeds after he decided to enter his name into the transfer portal. You're seeing names like Clayton Welch and Trill Williams and a lot of his former teammates from that 18-19 group that just have, a ton of respect for kind of what Tommy poured into this place over the last 3-4 seasons. And, they knew what he tried to play through in 2019. Those were some of the teammates' hands that he was squeezing when Todd Battaglia was sticking that needle in him before the game. I mean, that is just that look behind, that peek behind the curtain that you're often not privy to. And, that's what I hope most people took away from the article. It's not about, charts and what ifs and, Heisman dreams or anything like that. It's just this is the inner workings of a football program, and it's not always pretty. And there is so much that goes into the end product that we see unfold 3.5 hours a day on Saturday afternoon.
No question about it. So as Syracuse moves on, that quarterback room gets interesting. Garrett Schrader will be out there for the first time this week without Tommy looking over his shoulder. We saw a bit of Jacobian Morgan last year. He played 4 games for Syracuse when that roster just got so depleted, including at the quarterback position. I thought he looked good at times, but does he fit the new mold that Syracuse football is in? Is a question. And look, Nate, as you know as well as anybody, the backup's going to play one way or the other. That backup quarterback at Syracuse is going to get on the field. So, I mean, if you want to go with the odds of what's going to happen in Syracuse's, final 5 games down the stretch here, we're probably going to see Jacobian Morgan one way or the other. But the adjustment in that quarterback room gets really interesting really fast here. Syracuse is trying to get to its bye week. It's got to win some games down the stretch here, particularly on the road, as we'll get into with this Virginia Tech matchup. So at least we've seen a little bit of Jacobian Morgan and what he's capable of. The question is, does he fit the new mold of the Syracuse offense?
Right. Well, the calculus changes a bit, certainly. Now you really got to, fingers crossed that Garrett can ride this thing out. That's what Dino had always said from the beginning of the season is, we got 2 guys that we feel comfortable playing. And if we can finish the year with either one of those guys as a starting quarterback, they're going to have a chance for a good season. Jacobian, obviously, got his feet wet a little bit last year. So it's not going to be totally brand new with him. I don't know how much work he's gotten in practice up until this week, just because he was, certainly in that third spot behind Tommy and Garrett for much of the season, much of the preseason, much of the spring, quite frankly. But, if Syracuse can continue to run the ball and Jacoby and whoever is the quarterback can manage the game, not turn the ball over, protect the ball, and make on time, accurate throws, this offense is going to have a chance. This is still going to be a team whose formula for success probably rests best with the ground game and strong defense. And if you clean up special teams to the point where they don't hurt you in field position or hurt you in the kicking game, those are primarily going to be probably I think your best path to winning. But Yeah, I mean, certainly if you're asking me, can Jacobian do what Garrett can do with his legs? I would say no. But that I think is going to be the adjustment now that Syracuse is going to have to adjust to from the other side too. Is I think there's going to be a lot of attention and a lot of a focus from opposing defensive coordinators on legitimately stopping or trying to stop or slow down Sean Tucker and to a certain extent Garrett's legs and force Syracuse to beat them with the throwing game. But that's not nothing new either. We've kind of thought that was going to be the blueprint ever since Dino made this decision, a month ago.
Nate, you mentioned Sean Tucker there. Here we are just past the midway point of the season. Mid-season All-American awards were put out this week, and Sean Tucker's name was there, which is no surprise. We're kind of running out of ways to describe what he does on the field, so being able to add that title was refreshing because it was something new. He's approaching 1,000 yards, which still means something in football, even though the running game has kind of been cast aside, if you will. Tucker has revived that here at Syracuse. But, man, the name that really pops out here is Cody Roscoe. I mean, if we had to pick somebody off that defensive line that was going to be in this position, you're thinking Josh Black, you're thinking McKinley Williams, you're thinking Kingsley Jonathan are going to be those names. But it's Cody Roscoe, the transfer in from McNeese State, who has really popped, has been consistently good, not occasionally great, to steal that phrase from Dino Babers. And just goes to show you, look, for some criticism that's been out there in terms of recruiting, transfer portal, those things, those are two players that have been brought in by this coaching staff and have been pretty impactful here at the midway point of the season. So, man, we've said it all about Tucker. How's Cody Roscoe doing this?
Frankly, McKinley Williams in practice all preseason, all August. So they were down their man in the middle, and that shifts some guys around. So you saw Curtis Harper get a lot of run early in the season. Maybe perhaps Josh Black could slide inside, and so I think Cody had some opportunities. Had more opportunities to try to splash and flash, and to his credit has worked extremely hard and has proven that he belongs at this level and is one of the top usher echelon pass rushers in the ACC. And that's not a bad house to reside in. I mean, I think his play this year, I think, is going to set him up for an opportunity to play somewhere next summer, next fall in the NFL. And you're right. I don't know of many people other than Cody Roscoe and maybe his camp and his inner circle had those kind of expectations. And for a guy to be top 5 in the country in sacks is special, and it doesn't come around very often for him to get mid-season All-American recognition from the Associated Press. It's special, especially for a 3 and 4 football team. To have 2 guys from a 3 and 4 football team have mid-season All-American efforts honors is impressive. I mean, when you think about the other schools that can stake a claim to that kind of distinction, Iowa, top 10, top 15 program, Georgia, number 1 team in the country, Alabama, king of the mountain in college football for the last decade plus. It does speak that the staff has been able to find some gems out there. Cody is a great example of that. Cisco is a great example of that. Tucker is a great example of that.
Deuce Chestnut.
And that, for a place like Syracuse, if you're not getting those guys, you're not getting much. So, credit to the staff for finding these guys and maximizing their abilities out on the field.
Nate, I wanted to bring in a question here from Rob, a loyal viewer of Orange Weekly and our post-game shows as well. It says, do any other QBs enter the portal during or after the season? He also had a question about Justin Lamson, who was a solid recruit. Anything on his development and how he fits with the current identity of the offense?
I'd say yes. I'd be hesitant to throw out names speculatively because I don't think that's very fair to the kids. But I mean, just quarterbacks want to play. Quarterbacks want to get into a situation where they can get on the field. And so if you look at the quarterbacks on this roster who, haven't gotten many opportunities to play, I would probably put those at the top of the list in terms of guys to keep an eye on after the season in terms of entering the portal. But it's also, who knows? I mean, who knows? I mean, I don't know if you cross any name off the list in terms of definitely coming back next year, because as we've seen, it takes the right person to make the right pitch to try to sway or convince someone to say, hey, stop riding the pine there. You're going to have an opportunity to come here and compete for a starting job from day one. And that's enticing to a lot of kids these days. And the rules have been changed to the extent that that's now a legitimate option for a lot of kids, because they don't have to sit out a year. They don't have to waste a year kind of just learning and sitting. They can get on the field right away. And so I think that's just going to be not just at Syracuse, but across the board. You're going to see a lot of activity in the transfer portal year in and year out. The quarterback position in particular, because of the nature of that position, just being only having to really play one guy. Guys are just much more in tune to wanting to play and wanting to get on the field. And, in a different era, they maybe would have been inclined to stick it out and try to develop behind the scenes and stay ready for their chance. But, different era these days.
So, Nate, we move on to Virginia Tech here for the Orange. And this is a team, to say the least, that is struggling on the offensive end. They rank dead last in the ACC in total offense, just 310 yards per game. They're 13th in rushing and scoring offense. They're at about 22 points per game at this point. They're 111th nationally on offense in terms of scoring. And just you look at it on offense, this is a team that is just fallen off a cliff. And this is Justin Fuente, also in his 6th year, by the way, as Dino Babers is at Syracuse, who came in promising a lot of things on the offensive side of the ball. It has not turned out that way. Fans at Lane Stadium are impatient. His seat is very, very hot. They even had fans leaving games this year. Now, Virginia Tech's 3 wins have all come at home. And if Syracuse is going to, first of all, they've got to break this freaky streak of 3-point games. This is incredible.
For my sake, I hope they do, because I will tell you, it is not fun writing the game story in about 3 minutes every week.
I'm doing some deadline writing myself this year, and it's been an experience because, why even start writing before the last 5 minutes of the game at this point? So don't cry for us, Argentina, but it's we've had to make some really quick adjustments there at the whistle, if you will. But that's got to break this week. But Nate, if you look at the last 5 games here, Syracuse, the math tells you, has to win on the road to make a bowl game, and this might be their best opportunity to do it. That defense for the Orange against a struggling Virginia Tech offense, I don't want to call it a must-win. It just kind of feels like a can't-lose kind of game for Syracuse at this point.
Yeah, I think you're really looking at this 2-week stretch here with Virginia Tech and then at home in Boston College as the pivotal juncture in terms of is this team gonna play a 13th game this year. You agree with everything you said. This is a Virginia Tech program that, there are some in the fan base that are souring on Justin Fuente. You mentioned that him and Dino came in the same year in 2016. Fuente won the Coastal that year. Dino beat him at the Dome. Was Dino's first top 25 win, kickstarting his tenure. And Virginia Tech got to the Coastal. I think they won 9 games that year. And then, it's kind of been a steady decline since then. They've had some locker room internal issues at Virginia Tech. A rash of players have gone to the transfer portal in previous off seasons that has taken a hit to their depth. The recruiting, certainly hasn't been at a top 25 level at Virginia Tech. So expectations are a little bit different at Virginia Tech than they are at Syracuse, quite frankly. And, I think, it was in both places. It was a headline for both coaches. Were they going to come back for this season? And, both ultimately obviously ended up coming back. And I think, the Virginia Tech AD with Babcock is, probably would like to see more wins here in the final month of the season so that he doesn't have to go through another coaching change. But you're right. I'll be interested. It's going to be my first trip down to Lane Stadium. Everything I've heard says it's a great atmosphere. I'm curious, with a 12:30 kick against a 3-4 opponent, what kind of a crowd are we going to get? It's certainly not going to be the type of environment that, we saw in the opener against North Carolina or a couple weeks ago against Notre Dame. It's not going to be a sold out crowd at 8 o'clock for an 8 o'clock kick and it's all charged up. So I total agreement. This is an opportunity, to be able to go into Lane Stadium for a 12:30 kick where a crowd might be light is a blessing, just like it was going to Florida State to face a winless Florida State team, just like it was playing Clemson, which Clemson was down to, 60, 65 scholarship players for a program that routinely is one of the deepest in the country. So the offense is struggling. Braxton Burmeister, transfer from Oregon, has been okay at the quarterback position, but it certainly hasn't been, one of those dynamic guys that they've had at that position in the past. Defensively, they give up 155 yards on the ground per game. So you like your chances in thinking Tucker will cross the 1,000-yard mark this week very comfortably. Garrett Schrader, I think, has an opportunity to, reestablish himself this week and look more like the Garrett we saw, against Florida State and against Wake Forest in terms of his impact on the field using his legs. And like you mentioned, I mean, the defense has been solid all season long. It would raise some eyebrows if all of a sudden they had some kind of a slip up this week and Virginia Tech scored a bunch of points. I think this is the opportunity. If you have to steal one on the road in the back half of the season here, this is probably the prime way to do it.
You know what, Nate? It just feels like this team's got to win a game one way or the other. Put aside where you're playing in the opponent. They've played 4 straight games that have been decided by 3 points. They won one of those. They lost 3. They've been so close, yet so far away. And we've scrutinized, the decisions by Dino Babers, the execution, everything, right? Hearing Justin Fuente talk this week, he was pretty upfront about the lack of confidence that's there on this team, how they feel like, and I'm paraphrasing here, but it's basically like, I got the sense from the guy that they're kind of stuck in the mud, right? If Syracuse keeps losing games, not only by 3 points, but if they're continue to be close games and all of a sudden in a week or two, they find themselves at, 3-6, 3-7, I think Dino's going to start sounding a lot like Justin Fuente, right? We were right there, yet it slipped away. This is still a team that's got plenty of confidence, right? You just look at how they play, how hard they play, how close they've been. I don't think that's lacking. It's just been, a play here, a play there, a bad call here, a bad call there that has prevented Syracuse from being, whatever record you want to say they should be at this point. Maybe 5-2 would be reasonable to say they should be at this point. So you just got to take advantage of a weaker opponent. That's as simple as it can get in football. I'm curious to see if they open things up a little bit more for Garrett. He's limited in what he can do in the passing game. I think he showed that. Now, Clemson's an extreme example. As much as Clemson's been off their game this year, as you know, Nate, it's a really good defense. So there wasn't much in the bag Syracuse could pull out against Clemson. I think they can do a little bit more this week. Tucker's Tucker, and you just said it, 1,000 yards. If he goes with his average, he'll get that this week, and that still means something in college football. Syracuse hasn't had one since 2012 with Jerome Smith. So you want to see Tucker get there. And, yet again, as you brought up at the beginning of the conversation, and we'll kind of end on this note, Nate, when you have a player like Tommy DeVito leave the program, they've dealt with Taj Harris leaving the program. What is it, a total of 6 players since the start of the season? It's a new level of adversity that Syracuse has to overcome. And how they do that on the road is just going to be critical for, as you said, whether or not that 13th game gets played this year or not.
Yeah, I'll add another thing to watch if you're going to the game on Saturday. We're gonna get a flyover before the game, and one of the co-pilots in this Air Force helicopter is going to be an East Syracuse Manoa graduate and Syracuse native, Nathan Delaney, Captain Nathan Delaney. So if you're in the seat, if you're going to the game, get there early by the national anthem, glance up, give Nathan a wave. Flying up from Georgia to Roanoke tomorrow, and then doing a little test flight before the game Saturday morning, and then hopefully hover right above Lane Stadium, 12:20ish, right around the national anthem.
Not to steal Pat Forty's gig here, but Nate, are you guys staying in Roanoke? By the way, I'm not traveling.
We are staying in beautiful Roanoke.
I have 2 suggestions for you. Number 1, 3 Notches Brewery.
Okay.
Number 2, the Pinball Museum.
Done.
It's awesome. So there is a pinball museum in Roanoke. And see, the trick here is you don't just go see a bunch of old pinball machines. You get to play them all, right? So you pay, I think it's like $10 for 2 hours of all the pinball you can play. Now, if you tell 8-year-old Brent Dax that would have been the case, like it would have been a dream come true. right? I think of all the quarters I was putting in those machines when I was a kid. So Pinball Museum, Three Notches Brewery, couldn't recommend them more. Downtown.
Not Frankie Rollins Steakhouse.
I have not been. So next time I go to Roanoke,
They put me in charge. They put me in charge of the expense reports this season. We're only sending another writer. we're doing a freelance photographer deal this week. So yeah, we're saving money by going to Frankie Rollins Steakhouse.
That's right. 100%. Well, you let us know how that is. We'll be looking for the coverage as always. We thank you for watching Orange Weekly presented by Krause Health. Again, we air this live on our Syracuse Orange Football Facebook page and our Syracuse Orange Sports YouTube page. Thursdays about 1:00. If you do miss it, though, easy to find on YouTube, on our SYR Football Twitter account, and on syracuse.com itself. Nate, have a great trip down there to Hokie Country, and we'll talk to you again soon here on Orange Weekly, my friend.
Looking forward to it.